Sergio Perez has had yet another atrocious GP in Belgium, where he finished 8th after starting 2nd, and after the criticism he's received for holding up Verstappen in the DRS train with Russell, it seems like his future is now more than certain. With a crucial meeting being held by Red Bull that will mainly revolve around the future of the Mexican driver, Ricciardo and Lawson are the primary candidates to replace Perez if that's to happen in the next 11 races of the season. But what does Tsunoda have to say about this, and more importantly, is Perez concerned about his future, not just in Red Bull, but in the sport in general? It's safe to say that Perez's performance in Red Bull has been subpar, to say the least. In the last 8 races, or more precisely, when the other teams started to catch up with the RB20, the numbers speak louder than words, and if we're to look at this table, we'd notice that despite not having the fastest car on the grid in the majority of these events, Verstappen still managed to score the most points in this stretch, 141, whereas Perez scored barely 28. To put things in perspective, that's about 3.5 points per race, while Verstappen has around 17.6 points per race, 5 times more than his teammate. This also comes at a time when his contract was extended to 2 years, but it's likely that Red Bull put clauses in there in case he underperformed the way he has. Hence the meeting between Horner, Marko and other centerpieces in Red Bull that decide who drives where. Marko himself has been quite harsh on Perez after the Belgian GP, and it's safe to presume that he would vote to get him out of the team despite Verstappen's defensive comments towards his teammate, who would be the only one not to threaten him for positions in the remainder of the season. Perez himself was very critical of the Belgian GP, and when talking about it, he said that it generally went pretty badly. Further elaborating, there are plenty of things that we need to analyse, but I think Mercedes was very impressive. We couldn't match the Ferraris either, so we have plenty of stuff to understand. It was a very disappointing race in Spa. It started well, I have to say. I was just struggling a lot on the straights. I don't know what was going on, but I had to save battery early on in the first couple of laps. We were obviously very compromised by having just 2 sets of mediums, so again, I think strategically it wasn't a perfect exhibition. It's something that we will get together as a team. I think we have too much going on in the team, a lot of things to focus on, so this is the last time I will speak about the future. Just to make it clear to everyone, I will not be speaking anymore, and I will not answer any more questions about the future. Regardless of what Perez will be doing in the future, the situation is pretty loud and clear. His seat is in danger, and we've seen that through the talks that Ricciardo had with his current team principal Laurent Mekies and what could be his next team principal, Christian Horner. Although the 50-year-old Brit is keener on bringing Ricciardo next to Verstappen for the remainder of the season, it seems like the results of Lawson in Silverstone have been quite solid too, which is why both of these drivers will receive a test in Imola so that the team will be able to evaluate who would be the better choice for them for the remainder of 2024. Obviously, this doesn't bode well for Tsunoda, who has been absolutely outperforming the car and did publicly say that he's ready to fight with Verstappen, something he's made very clear in Spa too, holding him up for a little bit and making him fight for a position, even though that was not the Japanese driver's race at that point. Be that as it may, Horner has admitted that there will be a lot of talks in the upcoming period about Perez's future, and although a primary thing to discuss, will not be the only thing that Red Bull has on its shoulders right now. The difference in the Constructors' Championship is now sitting at around 40 points, which is easily catchable if you consider the fact that McLaren has scored 242 points in the last 8 races, whereas Red Bull has scored only 169. 11 races are way too big of a distance for Red Bull to get comfortable, and while Verstappen extended the lead to Norris for an additional 2 points in a race that was supposed to be damage limitation, the performance of the RB20 has dropped severely, which is shown by Verstappen finishing 5th in the last 2 events and not winning a race in the last 4 venues, something that hasn't happened ever since 2021. When talking about this very important meeting, Horner went on to say, "Things are always constantly analysed. We have a meeting on Monday, but it's not just about Perez. There are other topics on the agenda as well, which we always do before the summer break. For us, extending the lead going into the summer break for Max will give him a better rest. I think for us, the focus is on the constructors, where we've seen another 7 or 8 points taken away from us in Spa. We need to turn that around coming out of the break in Zandvoort. But nonetheless, Horner was pressured on the Perez question and was further asked about how this meeting would turn out for the veteran driver, who is now more likely to be sacked from Red Bull and seek an adventure somewhere else, with not many teams offering free seats. To this, Horner said, "I think Perez is acutely aware that we need both cars to perform, which is what we had at the beginning of the year and where we need to get back to." These diplomatic answers do not quite give what Perez needs ahead of the meeting, especially if we are to consider what Marco had to say regarding the entire situation. The veteran Austrian, even though mostly aligned with Verstappen's statements, is now adamant that the Mexican driver doesn't really belong in Red Bull and that he totally collapsed in Spa, which is what the team doesn't need right now when the other three teams behind them have drivers finishing ahead of Perez constantly. Elaborating on the future of Perez, Marco said, "Sergio had the opportunity to take a good result from a second place. Unfortunately, that was not the case, especially in the last stint. He totally collapsed, where he set times of 1 minute and 48 seconds. What looked so positive in qualifying unfortunately didn't materialize in the race. For us, the situation that we will also go through in the overall situation is the 2025 season, because we have a number of drivers and also we have a concept. But of course, every result is important for Sergio, and 8th place from second in the grid is certainly not what we expected." Just for a brief reminder, Marco is the main man in Red Bull who is responsible for the young talents to be promoted to the senior team of Red Bull, and that is something that we haven't seen for quite some time now. Of course, the demotion of Gasly and Albon is definitely controversial because they were put next to Max, who is in another league, and this is one of the primary reasons why Lawson's promotion directly to Red Bull could hinder with Red Bull's hopes that he could be the next great thing in the sport. However, the future of Verstappen is also now very uncertain, as he understands that the entire team depends on him, and that might not be an environment in which he would continue to thrive. Nevertheless, the Dutchman, who had his own beef with Perez in 2022 and the beginning of 2023, when Perez emerged as a potential threat for Verstappen's championship defences, is now very friendly orientated towards his teammate. And if you are to ask him, there is no need to change anything with the current roster, as Perez weekend in Spa was quite positive with everything that happened on the track. Of course, a lot of this goes to the fact that anybody out there would challenge Max more in the same car, because you don't often see a gap of 0.6 per second in qualifying between teammates, unless it's the lower bracket teams like Sauber and Williams. But nevertheless, Max is feeling the threat that Red Bull could poise onto him if they're to bring a driver like Tsunoda or Lawson to the seat. Elaborating on this matter, Verstappen said, "Perez was not holding me up in the race. He was also just driving his own race at that point. We made the right choice in that, and it wouldn't have made much difference to me if he had pulled over earlier. Our first concern is the car. That is what we have to focus on at the moment. Perez weekend was positive, in my opinion." With all this in mind, a lot of situations are to be resolved in Red Bull in the upcoming period, and paradoxically enough, Ricciardo, who was also related to being sacked from the sport, is now the primary candidate to replace the struggling Perez. Be that as it may, things could get very interesting if that seat goes to Lawson because of the 5-race stint that he's performed in 2023, while Tsunoda has proven that he could be a much better driver than what many expected in the past couple of years. All of these will be hard points to talk about, and definitely there will be sides that will exit the meeting more hurt than others. Do you think that Perez deserves to be replaced? And if so, who do you think is the proper replacement for the Mexican driver? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.